heard the future before I ever saw it. It rose in Greenwood like a hymn at sunrise, lilting voices from storefronts opening their shutters, the clack of a barber's shears, a piano rolling out a ragtime tune from the Dreamland Theater, and somewhere a baby laughing as if prosperity had a sound you could catch with your hands. People from the white side of Tulsa called our district Black Wall Street. To me it was simply home, bright as a freshly polished shoe. The bricks on Greenwood Avenue glowed the color of warm bread, and the glass fronts threw the sky back in blue squares. If God arranged a second Eden, I used to think, he might set it down right here between Archer and Pine. I was 22 and lived with my mother above her small boarding house. By day I shined shoes in front of the Stratford Hotel, 54 rooms of red brick and dignity, and learned the way leather talks when it is hungry for oil. By night I kept a schoolboy ledger under the lamp, making columns of imaginary profits for the grocery store I swore I would own. In Greenwood nobody was only one thing. The barber sang in the church choir. The teacher taught piano on Saturdays. The porter kept a side business repairing watches so precise you could feel them thinking in your palm. "You keep your head down, son," Mama would tell me as she braided her hair, "but don't you ever lower your eyes." She knew how Tulsa looked at us beyond the tracks, how a black boy's laughter could be read as insolence, how a sidelong glance might be taken for a challenge. Yet inside Greenwood air moved easy. We had doctors with polished instruments, lawyers with offices that smelled of paper and ambition, bricklayers who measured with string so tight it sang. At the Williams confectionery, Miss Lila kept a bell on the counter ding, and a girl brought chocolate sodas in frosted glasses. At Mount Zion Baptist Church, newly raised, the choir's voices poured like light through the stained windows. And every payday the street filled with hats and perfume and the kind of talk that made you stand a little taller. "Morning, Junior," Mr. J. B. Stratford would say if he caught me stropping a shoe to a mirror shine. "Own the block with that brush." "I'm trying to, sir," I'd answer, and he'd nod like a man acknowledging a fellow businessman, not a boy with polish on his fingers. On a late May afternoon in 1921, the heat sat heavy as an extra shirt. Flies bothered the peaches on Mason's outdoor stand. A rumor started blowing in little puffs, nothing you could grab. A boy named Dick Rowland, a white elevator operator named Sarah Page, a closed door downtown, and an accusation tossed like a lit match. We'd seen where such matches landed. I kept rubbing the shoe on my knee, but my hands started to shake, not from the work but from the sound of white voices rising on the other side of town, the way dogs growl before a storm. By evening the whispers had swollen into headlines. White men gathered at the courthouse. "They're gonna lynch him," someone said, and the word lynch slid through my spine cold as a coin. Our veterans, brothers who had crossed the ocean wearing uniforms stitched with American promises, began to gather their rifles. I watched them march, boots in rhythm, faces carved out of resolve. "You coming, Louis?" my friend Henry asked. He'd served in France and had a way of looking at you that felt like a steady hand on your back. "I don't own a gun," I said. "You got 2 feet. That'll do." We walked with the others across the tracks toward the courthouse, where the square boiled with men and curses. The sheriff swore he wouldn't let the boy be taken, but oaths are thin paper when a mob is afire. We stood on the edge, a dark island in a white sea. Somewhere in the confusion a hand reached for a rifle that wasn't his, and a shot cracked the night like a board splintering. Then everything became thunder. I remember only fragments. A white hat rolling under a wagon, the metallic bite of fear in my throat, the way a woman cried, "Lord," as if she'd found his name at the bottom of a well. We scattered. Bullets stitched the dark. By midnight Tulsa's white neighborhoods had become rivers feeding one flood, pouring toward Greenwood with rifles and clubs and the blazing certainty that our success was a crime. "Get home," Henry roared over the din. "Home is that way," I said, pointing toward the red surge. He grabbed my shoulder. "Then we hold what's ours." We met the current at the Frisco tracks where Greenwood begins, a handful against hundreds, trying to hold a door while a house went to pieces. Houses on Archer Street popped into flame as if a match had been scratched inside their walls. Furniture was dragged to the yards for pyres. Men carried jars of oil that broke and licked the ground, and fire found the slick like a memory it had been saving. By 2 in the morning planes appeared, their motors gnawing the sky. Folks had seen planes before. Tulsa was an oil town, but never like this, circling like hawks that had found a field of mice. From them fell bright little eggs, and the rooftops suddenly bloomed with heat. Later, people argued whether they were bombs or turpentine-soaked rags. I only know the sky itself turned against us. Mount Zion, proud and new, caught like a candle wick. The stained glass burst and sang as it fell. Inside the storm, sounds stood out with a cruel clarity. A baby's thin wail, a man shouting, "This is my deed," as if paper could persuade flames. The Dreamland's piano giving one final sour chord as the wires snapped in the heat. The Stratford Hotel glowed like a furnace, bricks spitting sparks. I pressed myself into a culvert with 2 other boys, smoke twisting us small. "You with me?" One of them wheezed. We held hands like children. Dawn tried to come kindly, but the morning light showed a different city. Not the clean lines of storefronts and church steeples, but black ribs of houses and ash seeping across the road like gray snow. I stepped out with shaking legs. The air tasted of tin and kerosene. Chickens wandered singed and mad. A woman ran past me carrying a trunk so heavy the leather screamed. "Miss Lila," I called, she of the chocolate sodas. She turned, hair undone, face bleached with ash. "The bell? You still got the bell?" She opened her hand. There it was, the little brass bell from the counter, blackened but whole. She clutched it to her chest as if it were a Bible. "Move along," a uniformed man barked, and his rifle pointed not at the men who had set the fires but at us. The National Guard had declared martial law, and their order was to gather survivors like strays. We were marched at gunpoint to the fairgrounds and to the convention hall, fenced like cattle while our homes still smoked. I stood barefoot, my shoes lost in the stampede, on boards that smelled of manure and summer parades, and tried to count the faces. 6,000 of us, someone said later, detained, for our own protection. Grief clung to us like wet cloth. "Name?" asked a clerk. "Lewis Carter," I said. "Next of kin." "My mother," I answered, and my throat closed on the word. When at last I was released, a pass stapled to my coat like permission to breathe, I walked the charred streets searching for her. Our boarding house was a black skeleton. The upstairs window where I'd kept my ledger yawned empty. Only the chimney stood, lopsided, like a lone finger raised in protest. I pressed my palms to its warm brick and felt the world tilt. "Mama?" I called softly into the ruin. A neighbor found me later sitting on our step that wasn't a step anymore, rocking myself the way she used to rock me. We buried people in quiet haste, without markers sometimes, the men digging as if they could shovel their rage to the center of the earth. Numbers ran like ink in the rain. Dozens, hundreds. We were told not to count. The newspapers said 30-odd dead. Our mothers said more than anyone would dare admit. The Red Cross set up tents and handed out bandages and soup, and I learned the taste of thin broth and metal spoons. A nurse tied my foot where a nail had chewed it and asked, "You got people?" "I did," I said, and she patted my shoulder, that small human weight steadying a little boat. By July, the city tried to finish what the fires began. Ordinances were proposed saying we could rebuild only with fireproof materials we could not afford. Insurance companies shook their heads. "Riot," they said, and pointed to clauses we'd never read. But we had more stubbornness than money. We hauled bricks out of rubble, knocked the soot off, stacked them into walls. We slept under tar paper, shared coffee thick as courage, and passed tools from hand to hand. Lawyers from our own community fought the ordinances until a judge knocked them down. Mount Zion would take decades to rise again, but we laid its foundation with hymns and aching backs. "Lewis," Henry said one evening as we rested on a pile of salvaged brick, "you still making ledgers in your head?" "I am," I told him. "Only now I start each page with the cost of fire." Time did not move in a straight line after that. It looped like a cracked record, bringing the same hiss of memory every time the wind changed and blew the smell of ash out of some hidden corner. Dick Rowland quietly left town. The charges were dropped. The girl, they said, would not press the case. That truth came like a stone at the bottom of a river. Cold, smooth, infuriating. We lived anyway. The tailor set his needle again. Miss Lila hammered her little bell onto a new counter, and when it rang the first time, every head lifted as if a bird had flown in and laid a sun on the floor. Years turned me from a boy into a man and then into an old man carrying more memory than muscle. Greenwood rose, not as high, not as wide, but it stood. Children skipped to school past lots that used to be houses, and their laughter stitched something back together. Yet outside of Tulsa, people hardly knew. The official story folded itself into silence, as if forgetting were a kindness. Only our elders kept the names straight, speaking them at barbecues and wakes. Dreamland, Stratford, Mount Zion, Archer, Pine, Elgin, Smoke, Plains, Interment, Insurance, Denial. When word came that a commission had been formed to study what happened, I was gray and slow, carrying a cane with a handle shaped like a question mark. I told them what I could. The sound a piano makes dying, the heat of a brick beneath a palm, the way a city can tilt overnight and drop you into a version of hell that wears the face of your neighbor. I told them how we rebuilt when the law said we couldn't, how we held funerals without bodies, how grief grew a garden of grit. I didn't speak to punish. I spoke so that the thing would not be swallowed again by soft lies. Sometimes, even now, I walk to the corner where my stand used to be and place my hand on the new brick as if it were a forehead. If you lean in, Greenwood still has a pulse. On summer evenings, I can almost hear the jazz from Dreamland bending around the corner. I see Mr. Stratford stroll past, tipping his hat. I smell sugar warming in Miss Lila's pans, and I swear I can taste her chocolate fizz cooling the back of my throat. But there is another sound layered under all that, the slow breath of fire sleeping with one eye open. I hear it in the way sirens still make me freeze. I see it in the way Mama's hands shook when she counted coins long after the boarding house was gone. Success is flammable in a country that stores hate in its attics. You learn to move like a man carrying a lamp through a room full of curtains. Do not mistake me. Greenwood was not a fairy tale that a dragon wrecked. We were human, proud and petty in turns, stubborn and funny, believers and sinners under the same sun. But we were proof, too, proof that people shut out from the banquet could cook a feast of their own. That feast was the sin Tulsa could not forgive. And so they came with guns and kerosene and laws that wanted to make ashes permanent. They failed. They burned our buildings, yes, but not our arithmetic. We kept adding, kept repairing, kept saving the bell and the ledger and the hymn. We kept our dead alive by saying their names like a roll call at dawn. Sometimes I take a polish rag out of habit and rub the toe of my boot until I see my face. An old man looks back. Creased, yes, but bright-eyed still. Own the block with that brush, Mr. Stratford used to say. I never did own a block. But I claim this memory, and I set it out here like a sign in a window, letters neat and sure. We built a city. It was taken. We built again. If you ever walk along Greenwood Avenue, you may feel the ground rise a fraction under your step, as if the earth itself has decided to stand taller. That is our doing. That is our music. And if you listen close, you will hear two songs braided together. One the laughter and the bright clatter of daily living, and the other the low, unending hum of witness. I am that witness. I was there when the sky turned red and airplanes bruised the morning and we learned the exact weight of ash. I am here now, telling you as simply as a man can. Black Wall Street did not die because it was weak. It was murdered because it flourished. Yet even murder has its limit. Walk with me. Touch the brick. Hear the bell. Smell the sugar. Feel how the sun chooses the street like a favorite shoulder. The fire taught us what lasts. Not wood, not glass, not even brick, but hands. Hands passing tools, holding babies, tying ledgers with string, pulling neighbors out of smoke, lifting voices in a ruined church to sing stubborn hallelujahs. In those hands, the future has a heartbeat. In those hands, Greenwood is still being built, one steady, shining stroke at a time.